some of you may remember our next guest as the handsome but really horrible villain in the blockbuster film Ghost. But lately, Tony Goldwyn's busy portraying the leader of the free world as President Fitzgerald Grant on the hit political thriller Scandal. Take a look.
But while I have unending admiration for the Secret Service, I have zero tolerance for those who abuse their power no matter what their office. Exploiting their authority and seeking to hide behind the badge is a gross violation of your trust and a break with the values of this administration. These agents have been relieved of their duties effective immediately. Any further questions can be directed to the Attorney General, who will be handling this case from here on out. David?
But Tony isn't just an actor. He's a producer, a director, and a humanitarian, a longtime supporter of disaster relief agency AmeriCares. He became a personal ambassador for the cause and hopes that his involvement engages and inspires his fans to give back. He's here to tell us what it's like to be the president and why philanthropy is one of his personal priorities. Tony, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, happy to be here.
You have obviously a huge fan base because of Scandal and, of course, your acting career for sure. So a lot of people know a lot about you. But for people around the world, some of our viewers around the world, they may not know your family history being in entertainment. You have quite a lineage, don't you?
I really do, yeah. Both of my grandfathers were really quite prominent in show business. My paternal grandfather, my father's father, was one of the founders of the movie business of Hollywood, Samuel Goldwyn.
Yeah,
so
who doesn't know that?
He produced the first feature film that was ever made in Hollywood, actually, called The Squaw Man in 1914, and then went on for, 50 more years to make some really extraordinary movies. And he was, of course, part of that time he'd started the company that became MGM,
right.
Metro Goldwyn Mayer. So that's where that. But really, most of his career, he had his own small studio. He was an independent producer. My other grandfather, Sidney Howard, was my mother's father. Was a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright.
Right.
Say that 10 times fast. And also a wonderful screenwriter who won an Oscar for writing the screenplay for Gone with the Wind.
Oh, okay.
So he was a Broadway playwright,
and
and then also he actually was under contract in the 1930s to Sam Goldwyn, my paternal grandfather, and he wrote a lot of movies, wonderful films for Goldwyn Studios, and then at the end of the 30s he made Gone with the Wind, and tragically died in 1939, the same year he won an Oscar for Gone with the Wind.
No.
Yeah, he had an accident with a tractor. They had like a little country place outside of New York City, and he was doing something with a tractor and got in an accident and died in the prime of his career.
Jeez, wow.
So I never knew him, but I did know.
No, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Scandal. The crazy success of that show.
Yeah, it's been really wonderful.
What a role, playing president. Role of a lifetime, I mean, for you,
yeah,
what's
I've
it like?
had some really great roles, but Fitz, which is the name of my character on Scandal, is just such a fabulous character. It's the first time, I'd mostly, because I also am a director, I'd never committed to a long-running series before. I'd done some, like a few episodes of something, or mainly I've done movies. Right. So, because that affords you to direct films. I could go back and forth, but whereas a series kind of limits you because you're very busy. Anyway, I had no idea how exciting it would be to play one character for 5 years, which is what I've done. And, the range of the characters that our creator, Shonda Rhimes...
She's brilliant.
Writes, Fitz is... he's complicated.
He's
complicated, to say the least. He's kind of wonderful and open-hearted in many ways, and yet can become diabolically evil and cruel.
Yeah, you can be a real jerk.
Yeah, he's sexy and romantic, and yet at other times he behaves abominably.
Which must be so much fun for you.
It's great. It's just great, and all the characters and the actors we have the most spectacular cast, and it's almost like doing a play, because Shonda Rhimes writes very theatrical scenes, and we often have big, long speeches that we give, and it's always really challenging. And again, the greatest thing is the actors that we work with. Everyone is so wonderful, and all great people, and we've really become a family. It's been a great experience.
Well, it's working, and I recently found this out, that Scandal is a huge hit in China.
I have
Did you
just
know
found
that?
this out,
Yeah.
and which is very exciting to me. So, thank you, Chinese viewers.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful.
They love you guys.
And I want to get to know everybody. So maybe I'll come visit.
You should. You should, because I think you have a lot of fans in China. But what's interesting is, I don't know if you heard this, when Mrs. Obama, the First Lady, went to China on a visit, apparently one of the questions she was asked by a journalist was, is scandal really, the reality of the White House? And Mrs. Obama had to assure the Chinese that no, this is nothing like Scandal, the TV show, because they really think that it might be similar.
I did not know that.
Yes, this is what you're doing.
I want to watch that interview. Well, because Mrs. Obama is a big Scandal fan.
Yes, I know that. I mean, so
everyone in the White House, they're like rabid Scandal
really?
fans. I went to Washington, like maybe it's our second season or something, and I've been a few times since then. But I went to the White House, and people. I've been told by a friend of mine who worked for the Obamas, he said, our morning staff meeting at 7, where the president would come in at 7:45, and we would all meet at 7:30 in the morning on a Friday morning after Scandal, because that airs Thursday night. And all I would talk about was Scandal.
Wow.
And the president would come in and he'd go, come on, guys, we got to get to work.
People love it, obviously. Well, listen, let's talk about now outside of acting. I know a very important thing for you is humanitarian causes. And the organization that you've become involved with for many years now is AmeriCares.
Right.
Which is a phenomenal organization. They do work all over the world. Tell me first why you decided to get involved with them.
Well, I got involved with AmeriCares very organically. Sort of as a preface, I kind of feel like being an actor and a celebrity, and once in a while, every so often in our career, we're involved in projects that give you a very big profile, like Scandal or other, or Ghost you mentioned, or other things that I've been involved with. And so I feel see an opportunity and feel a responsibility to use my voice to shed light on things that deserve some attention. So, but I live in Connecticut, and the town where I raised my children was the base for this group, AmeriCares. And my wife told me about it, and I thought, what an extraordinary organization. So I just got to know the people because of a neighbor who was involved and invited us to a party. I heard the story of how it started, and they were
let's talk about that,
the
'cause it's
founder,
amazing.
and I just was immediately blown away by it, and that was over 15 years ago. So there was a man named Bob McCauley, who is no longer with us, who in 1977, if I have my AmeriCares history correct, maybe it was a few years before that, but it was in the mid-70s, and it was still when people were trying to get out of Vietnam.
Right.
And the North Vietnamese had taken over the country completely. And Bob was an executive at a paper company, a businessman. And he saw on television there was a crash of an airplane, of a commercial plane that was flying a bunch of Vietnamese orphans to the United States. And the plane crashed in the jungle, and I think it was in Cambodia.
It was Cambodia, I believe.
And the Pentagon, and was saying there's 200, I think the number was 237 orphans were stranded, and nobody could get to them, and isn't this a tragedy, and they're going to die. And Bob thought, how can we, as the greatest nation on earth, in America, we have all these resources, the richest country in the world, we can't do anything. And he called the Pentagon, and they said no, and he had relationships at the White House, and no one could do anything. He said, isn't this terrible? And he said, this is not good enough. So he and his wife, Lila, took out a second mortgage on their house. And Bob rented a 747, and he flew to Cambodia, and he picked up these kids.
Yeah, and saved their lives.
And brought them back to America and saved their lives and got them placed into foster care and into adoption. But anyway, he did this. And he said, this is, there's too much red tape in the business of humanitarian relief.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just do this. So he started this organization that became AmeriCares. And the idea was to just cut through and get it done and get it delivered. And they've now have pretty much, they show up they are first responders. If I can describe what they do, if people don't know, what AmeriCares does is they're in the business of responding to disaster. And they show up, they're first responders with medical supplies and doctors, and they work with local agencies on the ground to very quickly get in there. If it's a hurricane, an earthquake, a war, a famine, you know, all kinds of. They were the first responders at 9/11.
Yep.
You know, they were the first ones into Iraq after the Iraq invasion of Iraq. They have been in the earthquakes in Turkey, the tsunami in
the Ebola crisis,
the Ebola crisis in West Africa.
I mean, there's nowhere they won't go.
Nowhere they won't go.
Right?
And then what they do, which I think is extraordinary, they maintain a long-term presence.
Right.
So they help local organizations, you know, that have minimal infrastructure, but have relationships within local governments, and they will help build out the infrastructure that already exists in those countries. And they will stay for years, sometimes decades, until those you know, local organizations are up and running and really are viable.
That's what I loved about when I was researching AmeriCares more deeply, is that, yeah, they stay for long periods of time. They don't just go in for a couple of days or a couple of weeks and then ship out after they think people are sort of taken care of.
Exactly.
It's that long-term commitment.
That's the model, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Doctors Without Borders is an extraordinary organization.
Yep.
So, but what Doctors Without Borders is, they go in also first responders, and they basically do pop-up clinics.
Right.
And then will address the crisis, and then they, you know, when the crisis is over, they go to the next crisis. AmeriCares is a slightly different model, whereas they go in and, again, as I said, will work with local, possibly very crude, you know, healthcare infrastructure, or hospitals or clinics or whatever the local thing is, and build up those local things. I mean, they've been in El Salvador for, gosh, I think 20 years. They're still, you know, the tsunami in the Indian Ocean. They are still in, you know, Sri Lanka and in Indonesia.
Yeah, and
have,
that was years ago
maintained a
when that
presence,
happened,
and that was over 10. That was 2004.
Any highlights for you in terms of your service and your participation with AmeriCares that really stick out?
Well, for me, really, the one that I really was knocked out by was because I was with them before and then have seen the results, were what happened, as I just mentioned, in the tsunami.
Yeah.
See that they are still in there. And then much more recently, the Ebola crisis in West Africa.
Yep.
I mean, because that is something that was so terrible for the people on the ground in Sierra Leone and Liberia, but could have been so much worse and could have spread out throughout the continent and beyond. And they really beat it. And AmeriCares was fundamental in that. And they've really, it's been a success.
It's amazing.
You know, it's been defeated, and they are still there and are working with expanding the health clinics. So seeing what they did in a very short period of time, it was such a great example of the way they work. And one of the other things that really got me committed to AmeriCares very early on was when I saw what an efficient economic model they are. AmeriCares gives over 98% of every dollar donated goes directly to those in need.
Which
and
is
for
phenomenal.
those who don't know, if you go look at Charity Navigator, that is an incredibly high percentage.
Huge.
I mean, I think something like the American Red Cross, forgive me if I get the numbers wrong, but some big ones like the Red Cross are in the 50s or 60s, you know, percent. And because they have big overheads, big administrative costs.
That's right.
And AmeriCares is very lean and mean. And they leverage, you know, every dollar donated is leveraged into $20 of aid delivered, because they get a lot of in-kind donations from pharmaceutical companies and doctor services. And, you know, they get a lot of, you know, medical materials donated. So they
well, they're doing it right.
They're doing it right.
Because the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, they're doing it right, and they're actually solving these problems
Yeah.
and dealing with these crises all over the world, which is what people want to see in an organization like that. You know, Tony, you mentioned a little bit earlier about, you know, using your profile, and people in Hollywood, there's a lot of famous people, obviously, this is the town for it. And oftentimes, you kind of see a misuse of that. People want to check in and check out, right? Because it's about them, not really about the cause.
Yeah.
Is this a way for you to get out of that space of Hollywood and be able to kind of think of others and, you know, not get wrapped up in this life that people seem to have here in Hollywood?
Well, I'll qualify that a little bit, because I have so many colleagues who are so committed to important causes and use their profile to do incredible work. So I would say the majority of people that I know are inspirational to me. You know, so I think there certainly are people that, you know, lend their name to a million things and want to show up and have the picture taken because they think it'll be good for their image.
Right.
And that, yeah, I'm allergic to that, and I wanted to stay away from that. And I do try, just for my own sense of myself in my life, you know, make sure that if I'm doing something, I'm doing it in a substantive way.
Yeah.
As someone said to me, I was at you know, talking at an event last month, and someone said there are workhorses and there are show horses in Hollywood.
That's good.
And
That's good.
and he said, you know, so I prefer to be a workhorse.
Yeah.
That's all. That's just a personal thing.
Yeah.
You know, look, I've done things where if someone asks me to show up at something because it will help them gain attention, and it's not something that I'm intimately involved with, I'm happy to do that.
Right.
But something like AmeriCares, and there's a couple of other. You know, I'm careful how much I get involved with because I want to make sure that I'm doing it in a substantive way.
And doing it for the right reasons.
And definitely for the right reasons,
Yeah. Tony, I can't let you go, of course, without asking you about the next season of Scandal. I mean, it was, of course, left on a cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you tell me?
I can tell you very little because
of course
I would be struck by lightning if I gave you anything away. But, well, so where we left at the mid-season finale was Fitz and Olivia. Our relationship is shattered.
Yes.
For the moment, anyway. It was pretty rough. Olivia did, I think, a very dangerous thing that she never told Fitz about.
Okay.
She, I guess, plug your ears or leave the TV if you have not.
I know, this is a spoiler.
Seen the show, this is a spoiler, but Olivia had an abortion.
Yes.
And did not tell Fitz, which is going to be.
If
I ever find out about that,
you're going to go crazy. Yeah, he'll go crazy. Yes.
But really, that was very bad. Mellie is really on her way to wanting to be president of the United States, but she and Fitz are really at odds. So who knows how that's going to go? We're going to get much more into that.
Right.
And so we'll see how, you know, in Fitz, for my character, really, he's alone for the first time, like really alone, without the partnership of either Mellie or Olivia. And he's sort of estranged in a funny way from Cyrus, his chief of staff.
Right.
Their relationship has kind of gone cold. So we're going to see what it's like for Fitz to be alone and how he handles that. And he's very work focused. He really is another year and a half or so in his term. We come back 6 months later.
Okay, gotcha.
And we'll see Fitz very focused on, you know, cleaning up his legacy, which has been a little messy.
A little, yeah, definitely a little shattered.
You know, he's tried to be a good president. He wants to really focus on work, so that part's good. But his personal life is going to be painful and difficult. But
well, I hope Fitz isn't alone for too long.
I hope not either.
Yeah, because that's why people tune into that too. You know, for the.
Yeah, and let's just say Shonda knows her audience. So.
She does, and she's amazing. Tony, you're amazing too, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing all about yourself and AmeriCares. It's great stuff that you do.
Yeah,
keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. We'll be right back with more from Los Angeles. Stay right there.